have a real estate and transportation committee meeting, which is chaired by Commissioner Reed. So Commissioner Reed, if you could take this from here, sir, that would be great.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Let me switch over here a minute. Okay, I see Commissioner Walker's here. I don't know if Commissioner Franklin is connected yet, but I would like to call the meeting to order for the Real Estate and Transportation Committee. We only have one order of business today, that being the second modification of lease agreement with Draken International. Is Palmer connected right now?
Palmer will be joining us shortly. He's working on some technology issues, but
so
I can go ahead and present.
You're going to go ahead? Okay, great.
Yes, sir. This is the second modification of the lease agreement that we have with Draken. We are seeking to modify the existing lease to provide for additional space, as well as clarify some of the terms with regard to obviously a rent adjustment for the additional space. We currently lease approximately 158,000 square feet. We're looking to increase that space to 172,695 square feet. The lease modification would be retroactively effective May 1st, 2020, subject to the commission approval. Additional lease space would be charged at the prevailing rate of $3 per square foot. That would result in an annual increase of $41,685, and that would be through February 28th, 2021. And then on March 1st, 2021, the rent increase would be to $3.25 per square foot, giving an overall increase of $45,158.75 per year for the remaining 2 years of the initial term. If you recall, the initial term was a 10-year lease agreement that also had 2 additional 5-year renewal periods.
Thank you very much. I see Gene is here. I have a question of him. Good morning, Gene.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Most of our space is leased for substantially more than this. I guess because of the length of the lease when it was originally done. Is that the reason for our lesser price than we normally get?
Well, this is when we originally went into this lease, 8 years ago now, a little less than 8 years ago, when we did the lease, we basically had step rent. So every 2 years it increases for them, and they have a massive footprint obviously out there, and I'm sure you've seen it. But this is just a continuation of that. So they're on, I think their lease goes through February 28th of 2023, and then they have 2 5-year options after that. So.
Okay, and of course we make some pretty good revenue off their gasoline, I presume, fuel, don't we?
Well, no, I mean, to be honest, no, we don't, because they don't, I mean, most of their flying obviously is happening away from here. They're only flying here when they're whether they're regenerating aircraft or they're bringing aircraft back here for maintenance. But I think their last lease payment I just saw for this month, they're right now about $42,000 a month is what they're paying us to be in that space. So they're one of the larger tenants here on the airport. So they pay a good amount based on the space and what they're able to do over there.
Great. Commissioner Walker, I see, I'll get to you just a minute, Mayor. Commissioner Walker, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Conrad, if I could, Mr. Chair. Mr. Conrad, I noticed the second modification to this particular lease agreement, and we know the kind of work that's being done by Draken out there at our airport. Do you foresee anything else that will come before us, which will help, of course, with them and their business and and the business they're providing? Do you see, have there been a talk about some additional situations that may come before us in the future with their business process moving forward?
Well, as you recall, we had talked about several months ago now, an expansion opportunity with them. Draken's been bought out by a company called Blackstone, and they have a new CEO and a new COO, and they are actually in town for the next several weeks. So hopefully I'm going to get in front of those folks and we can talk about, their future and what they're looking to do. But they have a new group of leaders for Draken. They're still Draken, but Blackstone now owns them, so there will be some changes. But as far as their footprint here, I don't see that changing, for what they have today. But as far as the expansion, we're still waiting to hear from them what they want to do or not.
Okay, thank you, sir. Wanted to make sure I heard that. Thank you.
Mayor Muntz, you had a question of go ahead.
So, Mr. Conrad, you had mentioned the term of the lease is 2023, and I'm looking at 2021 on this particular amendment. Are you sure it's?
No, it is 2023. The rent adjusts in 2021, and it goes to the $3.25 a square foot.
Commissioner Walker, do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
I second. Is there any other discussion? Appears to be none. Commissioner Walker, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes. Commissioner Franklin, I understand, is out of town. It passes unanimously. I don't think there's any other issues that we have to bring forth today. And with that, I will adjourn our meeting.
Thank you.
Which is wonderfully timed, because now we can begin our agenda study, because it is 8:31. So I will give Mike Mustard a chance to end that and clip on to a new agenda study.
Am I doing anything, Mike?
I'm good.
All right. So as you can see, we will begin our agenda study following a prayer by Dr. John Stamey from the Winter Haven Church of God. We will open the meeting after the salute to the flag and call it to order at 3. Our presentation will start with Audrey Kane on an update operationally, and then there is the approval of the consent agenda. On the consent agenda items, you can see that we have the minutes, and then we also have under Finance Director report one item, and so let's move to that right away. And if Mr. Brossart could talk to us about 7A, we can determine whether or not to leave that on there.
Well, good morning. A little bit later on this morning, Palmer or Ms. Ramona will talk to you about a LAP agreement with the Florida Department of Transportation for design, construction, and CEI services for the Three Parks Trail west from Cleveland Heights to Westover Street. This is a 100% grant, a federal grant, in the amount of $348,400. However, all we're requesting for this fiscal year is the design portion, which is $43,200. The remaining $305,200 would be budgeted in the transportation fund coming up this next fiscal year. Again, being 100% funded in something that's been planned for a great deal of time, we do request that this be approved.
All right, any questions for Mr. Brossart? Then is it okay to leave that on the consent? Thumbs up if yes. All right, we will. That takes us then to requests to appear from the general public, which are none. We have no equalization hearing. And so we go to our public hearings and B, ordinances first reading, number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 3 ordinances on the agenda, all related to the Orlando Health application to develop property just south of the Parkway. If you jump across the Parkway from the Sam's Club, that's the property that's involved, about 80 acres of property. I don't know if I saw Teresa on the call or not.
She is.
I am on.
I'm sure she can show you some maps and give you more background.
Sure. As Mr. Davis stated, this is actually 3 items that are under consideration: annexation, future land use, and planned unit development zoning for a medical health and wellness campus on 79 acres, again located just south of the Polk Parkway and east of Lakeland Highlands Road. The annexation piece of this is governed by Florida statutes, and when we were looking at that aspect of the request, the key consideration is whether or not the property is compact and contiguous to the city of Lakeland city limits. With this being a voluntary annexation, the project will be required to connect to city wastewater services. And Kevin, could you give me the ability to share my screen, please?
You are the presenter.
And is that up?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. All right, so again, you can see here the general location. The request for the planned unit development portion of this is ultimately for a total of 30,000 square feet of freestanding emergency room, 20,000 square feet of an ambulatory surgical center, 730 square feet or 360 bed hospital, 240,000 square feet of medical office uses, 150 room hotel, and 20,000 square feet of retail uses. The near-term development plan by Orlando Health is to construct the 30,000 square foot freestanding emergency room with an associated helipad, and then an additional 60,000 square foot office building, with the remainder of the uses being long-term in a 20-year build-out. When we're looking at the future land use component of this, the current future land use is residential 1 within Polk County, which could allow up to 12 to 15 dwelling units per acre. With this office center future land use designation, they do have the ability for a maximum intensity of a 1.5 floor area ratio. However, the planned unit development zoning portion of this will limit the amount of development that could be achieved on the property. Looking here at this map series just gives you a better idea of the surrounding uses. To the north is the Sam's Club across the Polk Parkway. To the south is the Parkway Baptist Church and School. Across Lakeland Highlands Road are the Meadows and Waterview subdivisions. And then over to the east and adjacent to this property is vacant land within the Sandland RV and Golf Resort. This next map series just shows the surrounding future land use designations. And as you can see across the Polk Parkway, there's more intense activity center future land use designations with the residential primarily on the south of the Parkway. One key thing about the office center future land use designation is that it is intended to be primarily office uses. So unlike a business park future land use designation where you could have warehouse distribution, this future land use designation is limited to office and serves as a transition from residential to the more intense commercial uses across the Parkway. Within the property, there is about 15.36 acres of wetlands. The majority of that is adjacent to the Lakeland Highlands Road frontage. The property is also within the urban development area, the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District, and is adjacent to our Central City Transit Supportive Area. Those are all designations within the comprehensive plan and are important to keep in mind as you'll hear from Chuck later on in the presentation about the transportation conditions for this project.
And on this map, that green area represents the wetlands, right?
Yes, so the map on the right of the screen, all of the light green are wetlands. Within the planned unit development zoning, there is a site plan that will guide where the different uses can occur and also their building heights. Looking at this, area A is the more intense area. That is where the freestanding emergency room and the ultimate hospital would be located with the helipad. And there, within that area is where the maximum building height is 120 feet. As you move out from that center, the building heights do decrease, leaving the lowest building height of 36 feet right at the corner of Lakeland Highlands Road and Winter Lake Extension Road across from the residential subdivisions. At that corner, though, there is the allowance for a hotel, and that hotel could be up to 60 feet. The PUD contains special conditions in addition to the height and the setbacks related to uses and development standards, and the bulk of those do deal with transportation, given the ultimate build out of this project and its long-term impacts. There was a community meeting held by the developer, by Orlando Health, back in January of this year, and that preceded the Planning and Zoning Board public hearing that was held in February. And then a recommendation was ultimately brought back to the Planning and Zoning Board last month, and the board did unanimously vote to approve the annexation, the land use, and the zoning. During that public hearing, we did hear concerns from residents across the street, primarily in the Meadowlands and Waterview subdivisions, concerns being increased traffic, noise, building heights, and proximity to nearby schools. So you'll see in the conditions that we believe with the development standards related to both setbacks and height, we've addressed some of their concerns with regard to the design of the campus. Traffic, again, is being addressed through a significant amount of transportation conditions, and the placement of the uses with the more intense uses internal to the campus will mitigate some of the other concerns that they had related to noise and lighting. This table here just summarizes by tract or by sub area where those uses would occur. Again, tract A, the most intense development area. And actually, let me go back to the map here. Within tract A is the hospital center. Tract B over to the south would be those medical office support uses. Tract D would be the commercial portion. So within that area, they could have restaurant and retail uses. And tract E for now is designated as conservation and future medical development. At such time that they want to develop that area, they would have to come back and modify the PUD through a public hearing process. Want to point out in the retail and restaurant component of the project, there is the allowance for 2 high turnover restaurants, one of which could contain a drive-through. However, those restaurants would be limited to what are commonly referred to as fast casual restaurants. So a Panera, for example, versus quick service, which are your typical McDonald's, Burger King drive-through restaurants. Again, this is just a table summarizing all of the various uses within the campus and their placement within each of the development tracks. And this is an exhibit for illustrative purposes only. It's not being adopted into the PUD, but it does show the first phase development with the 30,000 square foot freestanding emergency room. The helipad is the H in the center of the map, and then the 60,000 square feet of office uses. And with that, I will pass it over to Chuck to go ahead and go through the transportation impacts and then the conditions to mitigate those impacts.
Chuck, do you need to be a presenter?
I'm going to present for him.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. So the next slide really just highlights the 2 main terms that we're looking at for the transportation mitigation package is how much traffic, how much of the capacity of the surrounding road system is being consumed by the development, and then does the development cause any of those segments to fail. And so as you move forward, you're going to be hearing more about Edgewood Drive, New Jersey Road, Bartow Road as being kind of the biggest concerns from a traffic standpoint, and how we've addressed it through those conditions that you'll be seeing in a minute. But because of the size of the project, it does have a pretty significant impact area that was studied by Kimley Horn and Associates on behalf of Orlando Health. The overall trip generation and build out for this project is 12,616 daily vehicles. The build out year that was assumed in the analysis is 2040. So the analysis looks not only at traffic generation by this particular project, but also background growth that would be naturally happening over the next 20 years between now and build out year. In terms of AM peak, what we look at for concurrency purposes is the 7 to 9 a.m. Period. And the project to build out would generate 809 AM peak hour trips. In the PM, it would generate over 1,100 PM peak hour trips to build out, and that's at a 4 to 6 time frame. For the purposes of the conditions in the proposed zoning ordinance, we're looking at a phase A and a phase B kind of threshold line at 721 p.m. peak hour trips. And the magic of that is that that's the point at which the development would be both adverse and significant on Edgewood Drive west of Lakeland Highlands Road. Because Edgewood Drive is a 2-lane road, the capacity on that road is less than the others in the area, and so we were using that as kind of a key a key evaluation segment for the purposes of phasing the project. Next slide, please, Teresa. Thanks. From a level of service standpoint, and I talked a little bit about this on Tuesday, our comprehensive plan has different level of service districts throughout the city. As you get closer into the downtown area, generally the area between the Polk Parkway and I-4, the Cumbie Road area and the Wabash corridor, that is the Central City Transit Supportive area, and that's more multimodal in nature. So we place less of an emphasis on highway level of service and more on transit, bicycle, pedestrian, and other ways to get folks around the area. One of the things to note about this particular site is that there's no transit service right now to this part of Lakeland Highlands Road. The closest transit service by the Citrus connection is about 1.5 miles up at Edgewood Drive, Lakeland Highlands, and about 2 miles to the east over at Bartow Road. So there is a gap here in transit service that we'll be addressing in the transportation conditions. The site itself and to the south is in our urban development area, which again is multimodal in nature, but it does place more of an emphasis on highway levels of service. As I mentioned earlier, the segments that we're most concerned with right now is Bartow Road north of Edgewood Drive, Edgewood Drive itself west of Lakeland Highlands Road, and the New Jersey Road corridor. To that point, and what's referenced in the staff report is the status of the US 98 Bartow Road improvements north of Edgewood Drive. Those of you that are on the TPO board understand that a perennial priority of the TPO has been a 6-lane improvement north of Edgewood Drive. And because of the costs of doing that and the right-of-way constraints really presented by the rail corridor on the east side of Bartow Road, DOT has come back with a scaled-down version of a capacity improvement that really, we believe, addresses most of the operational issues and the capacity issues in the corridor. DOT is planning right now to 6-lane Bartow Road from Edgewood Drive to just north of Commerce Point Drive, and then make significant intersection improvements at the Crystal Lake Drive intersections and at Lakeland High School, and make some other median modifications in compliance with the corridor access management plan. That project is under design right now. The right-of-way phase is programmed in the DOT 5-year work program. The construction is not programmed at this time. And so the TPO staff, Ryan Kordek, set up a meeting with DOT and myself last week to go over the status of this project and to look at ways to advance it in the DOT work program. You will be seeing this project specifically come up as a priority project this year in front of the TPO. And so those of you on that board, stay tuned. There'll be more on this as we start moving into the summer. Edgewood Drive, of course, is a constrained road per our comprehensive plan. So there are no plans or intent at this point to multi-lane Edgewood Drive. And because of the capacity and the congestion issues on Bartow Road, traffic analysis really showed that a lot of the traffic that's heading into the downtown area is using New Jersey Road, which going back to last year's discussions about Geneva Academy and Magnolia Montessori, there's also some operational issues on New Jersey Road that are being addressed by those particular projects, as well as a signalization project that's being evaluated now by Public Works in New Jersey Road and Sylvester. And so one of the things we're going to do is really set the stage for our future analysis of New Jersey Road to really look at conditions as they exist when this project becomes significant on that road section. Next slide. The way the conditions are structured in the conditions is really twofold. We've got operational mitigation requirements, and many of you have heard about the need for signalization at Lakeland Highlands, Deerfield Drive. Lakeland Highlands, of course, and the Winter Lake Road Extension are operated by Polk County. Deerfield Drive is a city street. There's been a lot of close coordination with the county on what are our options in terms of getting this intersection signalized. Their director of roads and drainage has said that they support the signalization of this intersection. So we are working with another developer, in addition to Orlando Health, to get this signalized sooner rather than later. And so the zoning condition associated with this project is that prior to the first certificate of occupancy, this intersection has to be signalized. And we'll be working on an agreement to cost share on that signalization. Also, as part of the prior to first CO issuance, the project Orlando Health is going to have to extend the northbound left turn lane on Lakeland Highlands Road at Polk Parkway. During the morning peak, traffic tends to spill into Lakeland Highlands Road. We've heard from numerous folks south of the parkway that this is a major issue. The traffic analysis did show the need to extend this turn lane, and so this is a condition of approval prior to first CO issuance for the project. Looking into concurrency mitigation for the second phase and the longer term build out of the project, we've been working very closely with Orlando Health, Polk County, who's in turn been working with Mr. Holloway on identifying a corridor for the Fort Fraser Trail extension between US 90 and Lakeland Highlands Road. Again, those of you on the TPO have heard that DOT has been evaluating a crossing of the Polk Parkway for the Fort Fraser Trail, and they've been looking at it for several years now. Because of the cost of that, everybody now has kind of shifted their focus on providing a connection to Lakeland Highlands Road and ultimately to the Three Parks Trail. And so part of the conditions that you'll be hearing about later really involve Orlando Health being responsible for the funding shortfall should one be identified at the time of construction right around 2024 for the trail extension across its property. So we've got some language in here that does address a potential funding shortfall only for the portion that Orlando Health would be impacting, and the shortfall would be up to $300,000 responsible by Orlando Health. And so that is written into a condition to at least facilitate the full connection from Lakeland Highlands Road over to US 98. Because of the lack of transit service in this area, it's important to provide accessibility to the jobs and to the services provided at this campus through build out. And so Orlando Health is agreeing to develop an on-site transit super stop, very similar to what we have at Lakeland Park Center up on the north side of Lakeland, to support transit service and downtown area, or a connection to South Lakeland in the Lake Miriam area. Earlier on in the development program, we'll be working to identify the location, the general design parameters of the super stop, with construction happening in the second phase of the project. The developer would also be responsible right about the 721 p.m. peak hour trip threshold of purchasing a bus, and then working with Citrus Connection to provide 5 years worth of operating costs at approximately $150,000 a year to initiate service, peak hour service in the morning and the afternoon to provide access to this new campus. And then again, as we get to that 721 p.m. peak hour trip threshold, an updated traffic analysis is going to be required that will look specifically at Edgewood Drive in the New Jersey Road corridor. Next slide. Next slide, please, Teresa.
Sorry, I almost left the meeting. Oh,
Teresa, are there any next slides? There you go.
yeah.
And really to sum everything up on transportation, we're right now reviewing a development agreement that ties down, essentially the timing of the different payments. The other agreements would need to occur with agencies like the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District. Financial assurances going forward, just as we've done with Lakeland Park Center and the Riverstone development within the city, and also the establishment of a concurrency tracking system that will allow us at the time of formal pipeline submittal to be able to look and just make sure that the project is within bounds or within the trip thresholds that are outlined in the zoning. So once the zoning is adopted, that's not the end of the story. There's going to be continuous tracking of trip generation during the life of the project moving forward. So that's all I have from a transportation standpoint. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
So when you, Commissioner Walker, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, were you going to say something?
Please go ahead. I'll do it at the end. I have notes.
Oh, okay. Mr. Barnaby, I know as we're hearing all the moving parts that goes with this particular development situation, and I guess different processes in place to support, I guess, at best, and of course, Orlando Health needed to know our concerns and what the concerns would be for transportation overall on a particular campus. Now, I want to make sure I heard correct from both you and Ms. Teresa. What is the actual initial date of startup date? I guess is this planned for, I guess, the first concept, which is the emergency room kind of situation, and are we moving? Excuse me, not us, but are they moving toward making sure the concerns that have been addressed by both you, Ms. Teresa, and you, Mr. Barnaby, are being considered or being taken care of as that date, whatever that moving date is for them?
Sorry, Chuck, go ahead, Chuck.
Just strictly from the transportation standpoint, what we've seen in the traffic analysis is the first phase or the first buildings would probably come out of the ground sometime in 2022, 2023. So it's going to take a while to go through the site development process to even get the first phase off the ground. So there is going to be some lead up time that we'll be working through the site development process. But as the project goes forward from that point forward, I know that in working with their traffic team, and I know a lot of them are on the call today, is that we've worked very closely, spent a lot of time getting into the details of the zoning conditions, and I'm comfortable that we've got a mitigation package that does lay out a good long-term program to move people to and from the site, given the constraints that we do have in the Edgewood, New Jersey corridor, given the status of Bartow Road, but also recognizing that there has been a significant amount of investment in Lakeland Highlands Road, getting it 4-lane. Of course, Polk Parkway is right there. So there are a lot of assets that are in place that do support the project, at least in the short term. So strictly from transportation standpoint, my concerns are addressed, and the conditions as they're laid out do give us a good roadmap, no pun intended, to get to a completion on this project in a good way.
And their attitude on this has been very cooperative as well, wouldn't you say?
Yes, yes, sir.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I have a part two to that question as well, but I want to hear what Ms. Teresa had to say as well.
Sure. So beyond the traffic concerns, we are confident as well that given the layout of the site, the level of the intensity, so the maximum square footage for each of the uses and how those are placed on the site, that those will mitigate any perceived impacts from the neighborhood. I mean, certainly they're going to see development now on a site that has been vacant. So, how we best lay out that project so that it adds to the quality of the community was important. And so limiting the retail to not include fast food restaurants, your fast casual, that was one of the considerations. Making sure that those buildings do front the street and that there's not parking out in front was another consideration. So the way the conditions are written, it's intended to achieve the same kind of building quality that you see on the north side of the parkway with the Mellow Mushroom development and the Wendy's, where the parking is placed to the side and the rear of those buildings. And then again, as you gradually step back away from Lakeland Highlands, allowing for the increase in building height.
So you feel, not so much you feel, but because I hate to use the word feel a lot of times, because you're not walking your feelings and emotions, but you believe or would believe that the concerns that are being addressed will help support our neighbors, other neighborhoods, I should say, and our residents, and moving forward with this particular development as it would be, making sure that we're taking consideration of their concerns and the issues that may have fallout from the neighborhoods and those particular residents asking questions. I know they had the meeting there at Sandland Ranch Golf Club there some month or two, a couple months ago, and neighbors were coming in as well as other business people, I guess, coming by as well to hear about this particular project and that kind of thing. But again, I think it's important, as you probably already know, that our neighborhoods and the residents around this area concerns are being addressed as best because when they start seeing stuff coming out of the ground, and we're having to deal with those issues at hand.
Yes. So subject to all the conditions in the planned unit development zoning, and then with the subsequent development agreement, yes, we believe that those concerns are being addressed.
Thank you.
Plus, the stage out on this is through 2040, and Lake Mary would be an example of a campus they have done like this, which is good to see the phasing of. And of course, we're growing to a much larger city by 2040 at that point in time.
And Chuck mentioned that there are representatives from Orlando Health on the call right now. They do have a presentation that they are available to make on Monday. And in that presentation, they do show some similar campuses that they have developed throughout the state to give a better visual of what the build out will look like.
Good, which I think we would all welcome taking a look at on Monday. Commissioner Reed and then Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have much issue with Teresa's program with presentation. As in reference to zoning, there again, my biggest issue is traffic. And Chuck, you addressed most of the questions that I had written down. I'm going to I made some notes here a minute. What is the concurrency level of Edgewood and Lakeland Highlands Road currently?
Right now, Lakeland Highlands Road is operating at a level service B, roughly. So there's definitely plenty of capacity on Lakeland Highlands Road. Edgewood Drive is operating at an acceptable level of service as well. There are some concerns about the Edgewood, New Jersey intersection. And so that's something that we're going to be looking at in the kind of the second phase analysis. So that's why, really the big push is on to get the improvements jump-started on Bartow Road. Because a lot of what we're seeing in terms of traffic going to Edgewood and then up New Jersey is really trying to get into the downtown Lakeland area, and would be best served to use Bartow Road. The issue with Bartow Road is that it's kind of stuck in the work program right now, not funded for construction. And so really what we're trying to do there is get some of the right-of-way funding actually shifted over to construction. And there's a resurfacing project that is now being discussed for, I think it's either 2024 or 2025, that we would want to try to get that moved over to support this widening project as well. So really, the focus of our efforts from a major road project standpoint would be trying to get Bartow Road moved forward. So in terms of the short-term development program, I'm confident that we're in good shape. So when we start getting 5-10 years out, that we really need to get Bartow Road in place. But I think the way that we've laid everything out is that it gives us time to work out that project and have that in place.
The Edgewood Drive, I know I frequent Edgewood Drive and have some property along that area, but the first 3 or 4 properties on the south side of Edgewood Drive, in the morning and particularly in the afternoon, you cannot go eastbound. The stacking lane there is so short, you can't even make that little street. So, I mean, there's 10, 12, 15 cars lined up there all the time, and it's almost, and then of course, by the time they go through, the traffic from the west going east cuts you off, and then you're right back waiting again. By that time, the light stops and you're stacked up again. It's almost, I think that intersection needs addressing immediately. And I would like for, are they going to do what is their total offsite cost going to be? Do you have improvements of cost going to be? Do you know that?
In terms of right now, in terms of impact fee payments into our South District account, is right around $5 million is what we've calculated based on the current fee schedule. there
So
would be a credit
You're going to pay $5 million impact fees in?
through build out. That's the build out. So that money would be coming in between now and, or
2040.
3 years down the road in 2040. They would get a credit for the purchase of the bus. And then we'd be looking at kind of an alternate impact fee scenario, depending on how much internal capture we have. With the mix of uses that are planned on that site, we want to give them credit for the interaction between the retail and the medical office uses and the hospital use. So it may be a little less than $5 million, but that's generally what we're looking at. And then those dollars could be applied to other projects in that south district.
And they're going to put in a deceleration lane and a stacking lane on the east side of the road going into the Sandland Road?
That would be part of the signal design. It would be turn lane modifications to be able to support the project on Lakeland Highlands. It appears that there's enough turn lane space on the Winter Lake Road extension to be able to support the project. But of course, during the design, there's very likely going to be turn lane modifications needed at the Deerfield intersection. What we're also allowing from an access standpoint is a right in, right out, left in connection on Lakeland Highlands Road. So if you're heading southbound, you don't necessarily have to go to the Winter Lake Road Deerfield intersection to enter the site. You can make a left-hand turn in and enter north of that point. So that second access point is going to distribute traffic and take some of the pressure off of that new signalized intersection.
What kind of improvements are we going to require them to make to get access to 98 through Sandland Boulevard?
At this point, in terms of that, the county right-of-way stops just on the east side of the development site. So everything from the end of Winter Lake Road, the eastern end of Winter Lake Road, US 98, is all owned by Mr. Holloway. So at this stage, I know he has had plans in the past to extend Winter Lake Road, of course, over to 98. There are some substantial right-of-way limitations as you get in towards the sheriff's office facility and those other businesses leading up to the actual US 90 intersection. I think there's only like 30 feet of right-of-way. So in terms of actual improvements to US 98, they're not even really factored into a mitigation package because of the right-of-way impacts and the private ownership going east from the development site.
Well, this property also belongs to him currently. Until they buy it, and I would hope we could put a little bit of pressure on him to have a through road of some sort. I know it's through road, but there are some little gates you drive up to, and they'll come up and down, stuff like that. But I think that would alleviate a lot of issues if we could get put some kind of restraints on getting access all the way to 98 at that point. And of course, I'm not too worried about the shortfall on the Fraser Trail. I'm more concerned about the shortfall on the funding of the Edgewood Drive and the other issues there. So, I applaud your efforts and doing all the different issues in reference to the development of the site. But traffic is already, you say it's level B on Lakeland Highlands Road, and I didn't quite hear the number on Edgewood Drive, but I would certainly think it's high C or close to D level in some areas, maybe even level F. But that's that. I hate to put a lot of restraints on our local citizens right in that particular area, and I think our traffic study is somewhat conservative in reference to what's going to happen there. So anyway, I think you need to tighten your numbers up a little bit. I would like for you to give us try to get more for us long run.
Commissioner Madden, did you have something you want to add?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Reed went out for a minute for me. So I just wanted to take this moment because we have the folks from Orlando Health listening in, just to let them know from our city commission position, we had our strategic planning retreat this week, and hands down, our transportation infrastructure seemed to be, our top priority. And the biggest concern from constituents is often traffic. And so, we just really applaud the staff Chuck and Teresa and everyone involved with trying to work with developers as partners, especially in Florida where we don't have a lot of transit and there's not enough dollars, for the transportation infrastructure that we need. And I think it really benefits the city, it benefits the developers, it benefits everyone to be able to work in tandem and in partnership. And so I just wanted to say, as a commissioner to the Orlando Health folks, how much we appreciate that aptitude and that appetite for partnership and to be thinking about things like the necessity of transit when you have the state of the region for Central Florida and we're losing companies because we don't have transit for workers to get to jobs. And so, it's more of a big picture comment because we had Orlando Health on the line to just know that I know sometimes developers think of government as regulators and kind of prohibitive in nature. But we're really trying to think of it more as partners in building communities and for the benefit of all. And so anytime we have a chance to work with developers who are willing to think about transportation infrastructure and transit, I just want to say that is going to, speak volumes to us and to our community. So thank you for the presentation, Teresa and Chuck. And we're just hopeful that, we can together make solutions that do benefit and help with some of our traffic concerns.
Excellently stated, Commissioner Madden. Aaron, do you want to weigh in on anything in response to that?
No, I think Chuck outlined it pretty well. We worked pretty extensively with staff to look at transportation conditions, how the project would affect local roads over the long term. So I think we have a pretty good program outlined now. And I think that bus line in particular will be a big benefit, not only to our development, but to the community and residents down in this area to have access to bus service. So, I think our traffic engineer could weigh in on any technical questions, but I think as you saw from Chuck, we've outlined a pretty good program for tracking impacts over the long term. And this will be, like it was described before, a kind of slow, methodical development that will have the chance to look at impacts over time slowly with each phase. So I think that'll be helpful for both us and the city as well.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you. And a couple of thoughts, just echoing Commissioner Reed's comments. I think as I was listening to the transportation impacts, the part that stood out to me is the potential impact to the Edgewood, New Jersey road corridor, and just keeping an eye on that over the long term and making sure we have a plan for that. You mentioned, Chuck, having Magnolia Montessori School in Geneva. I live right across the street from the Magnolia School, and so that the traffic on that road, as we know, is not getting any lighter. And so how do we plan for that? And I want to make sure that that we do have a plan for that. And I know you mentioned the traffic impact study and the analysis, and so I was glad to hear that. But I do think that's one area that, thinking long term as this project grows, is something that we have to have a handle on. And then I was just wondering too, do we have any estimates on what, in terms of annexation, what this could mean from a change in the taxable value of this property? And I know that we were talking about what annexation looks like at our strategic planning workshop, and I was just curious if we have any numbers on that, any estimates.
Well, I would speak to the fact that Orlando Health operates as a not-for-profit hospital. So in terms of tax generation, I don't know that we got into that level of analysis. I know as part of their presentation, they have some economic impacts to the larger community and go into detail about by the time we see a population growth out to 2040, what the need will be for additional hospital beds and also for medical professionals. But we have not done an in-depth analysis looking at what could be achieved through the residential that's allowed, and then any alternative uses coming in with the retail and the restaurant components.
Okay. Yeah, I would be curious to just see some of those estimates as part of the picture if we're talking about annexation and what that means in terms of economic impacts, even if it's not property tax change in that to the tax rolls, but just some of those numbers of how that impacts our local economy.
Yeah, I think those are good comments, Commissioner McLeod. And what we want to make sure we're doing, by the way, is some of this we could shorten, since we're in our agenda study, to things you'd like to see presented on Monday. So we could do that more thoroughly on Monday, and we could stay focused more on the getting to the agenda and the way we want to have it work out. Are there any other additions, like Commissioner McCarley?
Yes, I'd like to see too on Monday, maybe not only the economic impact, but the impact of talent recruitment locally to serve that hospital, and how you'll work with the Polk County and specifically Lakeland residents to have them employed there. So we're not seeing, us become just sort of a stopgap of people driving in from other areas. We'd like to have as many people on that campus as possible who are local. So if there's a way that may be down the road that you can talk about, but if there's any way that you're planning to do that, I know initially you'll probably have more Orlando docs coming in, and but support staff, nurses, we have several nursing programs locally in the colleges and universities. I'd like to really see your game plan on making sure that as a partner, as Commissioner Madden said, that we're partnering on all levels. Traffic, you've heard, I was going to talk about that, but all of my colleagues covered that thoroughly. But I do want to make sure that, as good neighbors and as people who are participating in Lakeland and you're committed to Lakeland, I'd like to see that piece as well.
Commissioner Walker.
I will concur, Mr. Mayor, as mentioned by Commissioner McCarley. But I'd like to also thank Mr. Bottlehorn for, at least, we're hearing that as part of the transportation and transit situation that we deal with here in our own city, as opposed to where they may be homebound in the sense of the Greater Orlando area, we don't have the kind of service here yet. We're believing we'll get there though, with transit and getting our people around not only our city of Lakeland but the county here of Polk. But just to hear you saying, knowing that you all have buy-in as this move forward in years to come, with having a service provided to that area, so our workers, whatever the workers may be, from the I'll call the blue collar to the white collar, will be able to get to and be able to get around that portion of campus and connect with our city as a whole. So thank you for that.
Agree 100%. Any other questions on this before we go forward? Yes, City Manager Delgado.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to tag on to what Teresa was providing Commissioner McLeod. One of the other things that obviously will ultimately happen as the build out of the campus takes place is we'll see some significant utility use, because both the campus is within our utility service areas for both Lakeland Electric and water and wastewater.
And the hospital is one of our largest utility users today, so that's a good standard. So I want to ask our city attorney, Davis, if the proposed 20022 has anything different that we need to cover than what we just covered in the 20023.
No, they all tie together. It's all the same thing, just slightly different aspects of the approval process. Just a couple of procedural points. One, because this is in the unincorporated area of the county, it's not within the city certification area. So you'll see the benefit of the city certification area. This land use change will actually have to go to the state for review and then come back. So we're probably looking at, Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, around July before this comes back for the second reading and public hearings on these. Teresa, is that the correct timeline?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then the other point I just wanted to make is that the PUD ordinance, the zoning ordinance, will be a quasi-judicial hearing. And the requirements of that is, you base your decision on what the evidence is at the hearing. So I just would ask you to obviously keep an open mind, and whatever final decision you make needs to be based on the record created at the public hearing in July.
Okay. And are we considering doing anything beyond that immediate area in that change of annexation?
I'm not aware of that. That might be a Teresa question.
In terms of additional annexation, no.
Okay.
No, but there has been some interest in some surrounding property that's already within the city.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Then we will move to becoming a CRA as we review item A.
Okay. The CRA item relates to the old warehouse property that the CRA purchased a number of years ago now at 820 North Massachusetts Avenue. That's been converted into event space that is now being leased by House Management. And it's had chronic water intrusion problems. And you can see in the memo that they've done a number of things to try to address those problems that have addressed the specific problems that were addressed, but there are more fundamental problems with the building and continued water intrusion. So the CRA retained a consultant professional services industry to study the problem, and they've come back with recommendations. And based on those recommendations, the CRA, the city's purchasing division, issued an invitation to bid back in January of this year. Had 5 bids that were responsive to the invitation to bid. The low bid being Crystal Companies out of Jacksonville for $155,000. The CRA Advisory Board met on its May 8th meeting, recommended that Crystal Companies be elected as the firm to perform waterproofing services to try to seal up all that brick that's leaking like a sieve. Apparently, I know Elise is on the meeting here and can go into further details if you need that.
All right. Yes, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to Mr. Drumgold, that's my question, of course. Knowing again the actual property and saw the actual review of what was sent to us regarding this particular concern, is there anything else you can see that would that we need to have come before us for mitigation purposes? Because I would think, of course, prior to even getting the building where it is now, some things were done to support whatever challenges that particular property would have had because of its age and because of years of not just sitting there, not having anything done or not having anything in there. And I do know buildings or anything that sits can deteriorate because there's no life in the actual place or the piece of property or whatever. Do you see anything else that may need to come before us besides this continual water issue that's been there?
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners, and just specific to your question, Commissioner Walker. Staff has spent about $90,000 just trying to remedy some of the additional issues with water intrusion. So this is specific to repointing the brick and making sure that we seal up some of the vents around the structure that are pretty obsolete to the functionality. You're correct. The building was old when we renovated it. And so, having a 1920 structure, and we did value engineer out a ton of the work that was supposed to be conducted when we did renovate the structure 4 years ago. But, you don't know what you know until you start to operate. And I think that over the last 2.5 years with the water intrusion issues, it's just gone to show that there was a lot more that took place. We also had a hurricane during this time frame, so I can't say that there's an immediate issue now that would necessarily come up. But I know that over the last 2.5 years, we spent outside of this particular this invitation to bid, we spent $90,000 just trying to remedy some of the other site issues, grading issues around the property, and so. We don't foresee anything. The systems appear to be operating at a high standard. We've since started to operate with our city facilities team to make sure that we have preventative maintenance schedule, something that we've adopted with all our properties because we do have some age to some of these structures. And so we don't foresee anything coming up, and I'll leave some space if, Fiorella, she kind of runs that team if she wants to chime in, but outside of that, Commissioner, what we're doing here, we don't foresee any challenges.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing we have to think about too is we own this building no matter who's in it. and one of the things that we have to do is keep it a dry building for whatever tenant would be in it if House 820 wasn't in it, and that's our responsibility. Daryl, did you add anything to that? Okay, Commissioner Walker, sure.
Yeah, could I have is it appropriate at this time, Mr. Mayor, to even ask a question about, I know talking about this piece of property and that particular area, there's some parking concerns that came up or is be coming up. Is that something that we can address at this time, or should we just wait until, I guess, that 2 weeks to come before us or whatever?
Yeah, I think they should probably, the CRA ought to bring that to us. That's why we have one, Okay.
All right.
So let's let them address that. And Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. The roof issue was resolved. Is that my understanding?
That is correct, Commissioner. The roof issue has been resolved. A lot of the seepage is coming in around the foundation here in the storage front, and then also we've got some vents that are along the face of the building as well that allow water to come in. And then also the water gets in through the brick itself because it needs to be repointed. Yes, sir.
Right. I've read the report, and obviously, it's a beautiful facility. I think the CRA did a great job on revitalizing the area, as well as the making the building and that look really nice. I've been several functions there. It's just a shame that with the ongoing issues, I know they've had to cancel a lot of programs going on there. And I hope that the young lady is successful. And I'm going to ask two questions that you may not know the answer to, but probably have a good idea. Do you know about how much money we have into that total project at this point, and what kind of revenue it generates a year?
Sure. So I would say that when we talk about House 820, it's a full campus, Commissioner. And so, I would say we've got about $3.5 million into the campus itself across more than just House 820. It's, we've also got Artifact and some other tenants in there. So we're about $3.5 million in, and the revenues vary because of the functions, but I would say that we're generating anywhere from $100,000 to $120,000 annually across the campus.
And one other question here, guy. I know has she asked for any kind of modification in her lease agreement? Because I know we're in a participation lease with her, aren't we?
The lease is structured such that she pays us rent based upon a percentage of her gross sales. So if she does not, this particular tenant, if she does not host any events, technically there is no base rent due to us. There are just some fees that are associated with the lease, the management. Those things are not paid out to the CRA. So during this time, really, there's no rent for the tenants. It's very minimal. We have talked through the lease addendum relative to the way that the city would like to, allow for the tenants to spread out the defer some of the lease payments. So this tenant has agreed to do so, and most of our tenants have agreed to do that. We're just waiting to execute the lease addendums provided by the city attorney's office.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? All right, we'll cease meeting as the CRA. That brings us to City Manager recommendation for the Cat 3 ILS.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that, City Commission. Before I get started, I want to thank you all for the time that you spent this week during our strategic planning process. Obviously, the work's not done. We'll be meeting again, I believe, on the 29th, but did want to thank each and every one of the commissioners and staff for the time they spent. I know that was a day and a half well spent by me, and I hope it was well spent by you. The one item that we have today is a professional service contract for upgrade to our Cat 3 ILS at the International Airport. As you are aware, the airport received grants in 2019 from the Florida Department of Transportation to upgrade the existing instrument landing system, ILS, to a special authorization Category 2 and then subsequently to a Category 3. Even though the Cat 3 upgrade will not be completed until November of 2021, there are several tasks on the project's critical path that need to commence to avoid delays. The completion of a Federal Aviation Administration categorical exclusion report and a design of the Cat 3 system in accordance with the FAA guidelines and approvals. The categorical exclusion report is required to be completed and submitted to the FAA for review. The report will provide documentation for the factors that are considered for a project to be categorically excluded from further federal environmental review. The task authorization for this project is with Environmental Science and Associates out of Orlando, who is under our continuing contract at the airport to provide the necessary services to complete this project in an amount of $70,340. Design through bidding phase of the project should take about 10 months to complete. It's important to commence the design this month so that the contractor can be in place, by the end of next February. Atkins North American out of Tampa, also under continuing contract, will provide the professional services under an amendment to their existing task authorization for this design not to exceed $767,365. So on Monday, we'll be asking the Commission for authorization to enter into both of these agreements. No appropriations are required for this request. The expenditures are eligible under the FDOT grant issued for this upgrading and have been included in the airport's 2020 budget. Gene Conrad's on the line in case there's any questions specifically related to the airport's involvement.
So Gene, if you could just reemphasize the imperative need of the Cat 3 upgrade and also what it means to our future tenants, and maybe even touch base a little bit at the end of your comments on off this subject a smidge on future anticipation of commercial airlines and the way about COVID.
Well, if that's quite a few things. So if I miss that last part, just remind me and I'll come back to that. But obviously reference the Cat 3, this is, obviously a part of our our partnership with Amazon and the lease that we executed. And now it's been a year ago, about this time last year. And I know that Jason Willey gave an update on the facility, and that facility will be complete at the end of the month. And then it'll start operating now in actually July with aircraft coming in and out. But part of that agreement with Amazon was for us to upgrade our instrument landing system from what we had was a Cat 1 to a Cat 2, which that is now complete, has been flight checked and is ready to go, and which was part of our contract as well. And then this third phase is to take it all the way up to a Cat 3, which will allow aircraft, whether it's Amazon aircraft and commercial service aircraft in the future, or other users who have the capability to use it to land essentially in zero visibility here at the airport. So it really, just as far as our capabilities, really takes us to, the same capabilities as, much larger airports like Tampa International or Orlando International. Not that we're going to ever be that size of those facilities, but as far as the capabilities, it is a big increase for us moving forward. And then in regards to, commercial service, obviously, and I've obviously shared with the mayor and Tony some videos from our consultant, and the airline industry has been completely devastated at this point. And for it to get back to where it was pre COVID-19, it is going to take quite some time. They're all trying to figure it out now. I read stories all the time. A lot of the airlines have the majority of their fleets parked. They're still flying. They're required to because of the monies that they received under the CARES Act. But the new norm for them, I still think they're trying to figure it out at this point. And, how people are going to be, how receptive they're going to be to get back in these airplanes based on everything that's going on. So actually, I will tell you, I would say as far as passenger traffic on a daily basis, the entire system was moving about 2.5 million people a day. Right now, they're about at 180,000 a day. So that's just that's a huge drop in the amount of passengers moving back and forth. But if there's a good little sign, that has increased from the low of 80,000 to now it's up to 180,000. So there is some, people getting back on airplanes, but it's going to be a long trek for them to get back to where they were prior to all of this.
But probably for us, we're going to have a momentum change in terms of the attraction for a couple of years from what we.
Yes, it's going to be a while. Specific to the network carriers, that obviously that was part of the revenue guarantee. Now, granted, there may be other opportunities with the low-cost carrier or a new startup that we have talked about in the past, and they haven't started, so they haven't seen the losses and had to deal with all that. So maybe that is something that comes out of this. And when they're looking at airports to operate from, if there are new airlines that come out of all of this, when you look at the costs of whether it's Tampa or Orlando, they spread those costs for their operation out amongst all the various airlines. And, if you have this massive contraction, you still have to cover those costs. So, it's unfortunate, but, those costs to the airlines to operate those larger airports, I would foresee is going to go up. So if you do have whether it's a low-cost carrier or a new startup, they may look harder at us because our costs are what they are, and our costs are spread out amongst our tenants and what we have today. So, in that regard, we are in a pretty good position if something like that was to come to fruition.
Commissioner McCarley.
Gene, do you think with this contraction of the market of big commercial airlines with hundreds of people on a plane, do you think we could benefit from more private industry folks who maybe can fly people and you feel safer because you're in a smaller area? Do you think you'll see a bump in that?
Well, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because we have seen, we receive emails and calls. We've seen a big uptick in people calling and asking for, who are charter operators out at the airport with smaller aircraft that, if I want to take my family of 3 or 4 and we want to go somewhere, who are those operators, and we can, rent the aircraft and with the pilot and get us to where we need to be. So we've seen an uptick in that. And we've talked about that internally as well. I think some of that will take a little bit, as far as just what we had seen in our business jet traffic with all the businesses coming and going. I think that will be a little bit before that comes back up, but we have seen an uptick in people looking for personal, aircraft to just rent and get where they need to go.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. And just to vary off the subject just a moment there, again, as long as Gene's on the thing, how is the program out there with the big drones is doing?
That company has left. They left probably about 1.5 years ago, if not 2 years. So they're not operating here anymore.
Not well.
Yes.
Any other questions on this? All right. Well, so if we have none, we'll do that on Monday. That takes us to City Attorney 20024.
Okay, and 024 also relates to the Orlando Health development south of the Parkway. That takes us to resolutions. The one resolution on the agenda is related to completion of the Three Parks Trail from Robin Road to Peterson Park on the east side of Cleveland Heights Boulevard. We have these are federal funds in the amount of $348,400 that will fund both all the design, construction, and construction engineering inspection services necessary to complete the trail. We have all the right-of-way we need. The YMCA was very generous in providing the remaining right-of-way that we needed. So this will go from Robin Road and take a left into Peterson Park and go just to the east of the YMCA's driveway there, and will then tie into the Peterson Park trail network. The design will be completed in June of 21, and it's anticipated that construction will be completed in December of 2023.
Questions on that? I think everybody likes it. We love parks. We love to be outside. So this is good. And then the next item, sir, under C.
Roberta is going to address the Napa Auto Parts agreement for fleet management.
Yeah, this is an agreement with the Napa to serve as the city's on-site supplier of automotive parts for our city's fleet vehicles, and they would be managing the inventory and purchasing inventory for our use. They've been our on-site supplier since 2010. The existing agreement with Napa is set to expire June 1st, which is why we're coming back through procuring another agreement through a cooperative purchase agreement with Sourcewell for Napa to continue to serve as the city's on-site supplier of automotive parts. It has resulted in a number of efficiencies and cost savings as well. Pursuant to the agreement, Napa will keep an inventory of $500,000 maintain an inventory of $500,000, and the city can utilize that as parts are needed. The agreement would be in effect from June 1st, 2020 to July 21st, 2021, with the option to also have subsequent renewals. And the reason for the shorter term agreement is because the Sourcewell cooperative procurement contract, the underlying contract will expire at that point. So we would have to go ahead and either renew or go through another cooperative purchase type agreement. Napa will bill us. Basically, the goal of the contract for Napa is a 10% net goal of gross profit rate. Basically, what the city has been spending is about $2 million per year in terms of what the city purchases on automotive requirements for its fleet. This is included in Fleet's FY20 budget, and it's also proposed in the FY21 budget, subject to the commission's approval.
Commissioner Walker, and then Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to just share. I know we have heard, and my colleagues and I have heard, especially so, this particular entity, how it has been very successful and cost savings for us here in our city, and almost we received accolades and awards for having this particular kind of operation within our scope of facilities and of course under the purview of public works. But I surely appreciate what I have come to know in my number of years after the agreement was done. The agreement was done, of course, some years back. How the efficiencies and again the cost savings has been done. So I would of course agree to not only this kind of movement for other areas in our city as well, that we can find and do something like this. So thank you again to those in that department that made this happen.
Yeah, don't say too much because Gary's on with us and we don't want his head to blow up too big, as it goes along. Gary, this is very consistent with what you want to see happen, though, in terms of an agreement, correct?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everybody. We've been partners with Napa since 2010, as Ramona said, and the parts operation was identified as a critical problem way back in 2008 when we did a consultant study. And frequently it is a problem with fleet operations in local government. So with a fleet that's as diverse as ours, the inventory management alone is daunting for a local government to do with organic employees. So using something like Napa saves us a ton of money in inventory cost every year because we don't have to spend any money on inventory, basically. Using them instead of our own people to source parts gave us 50-something thousand labor hours back to working on cars. We were able to cut about $200,000 out of the budget in payroll because of attrition losses of folks that we didn't need anymore. Nobody lost their jobs, but it worked out well for us. And I think the first week I was here, I walked around and counted all the vehicles waiting for maintenance. And it was 118. I did it yesterday and it was 13. So I think that speaks volumes as to the efficiency boost that we got from the Napa store. So I think we should keep doing this until I retire. Yes, sir.
My turn?
Yes, sir.
Bill, you're muted when you called my name. I'm sorry. Gary, I have a question. I was reading over the document a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's option 1 and option 2. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct. That's how
those are big documents, and I couldn't quite understand. Are they interchangeable? Can we take option 1 and switch back to option 2, or do we have to pick 1 or pick 2? And how do they differ? And if you want to meet individually, that may save us some time. I've just had some quick questions I didn't understand. I didn't see a lot of difference in between the two of them.
Well, the one that we have never done anything different than the net 10% of the gross profit. I'm not even real familiar with the other option as it is. So Ramona probably knows more about that than I do, but I believe that as long as you're under this contract, you could probably switch to the other one with some kind of amendment or something.
Just to clarify, Commissioner Reed, you'll see that the main document, the main contract, that is something that is there, but part of the contract documents is an amendment. And the amendment is at Exhibit C to the agreement. And that amendment clarifies the terms and sets forth the option that Gary was talking about with the 10%. So we wouldn't be exercising the other option during this agreement. However, as Gary mentioned, if we wanted to exercise the other option, we would have to do an amendment to the agreement. But because this is a cooperative purchase agreement, the main agreement was not modified as is. Instead, there's a corresponding amendment that accompanies that makes the necessary changes and as part of Exhibit C. And that's what you're going to see.
I must have missed Exhibit C. I stopped, I think, before I got to C. Okay, thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'm going to ask Commissioner Walker if he would serve as Mayor Pro Tem. I have to join a Florida Southern Board meeting at the present time, and you can take it from here, sir, if you can, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'll be honored to do that. Okay, as Mr. Mayor is getting off and I'm coming on, any particular other concerns regarding that particular item, as mentioned in 6C? 6C1, please. All right, seeing none, we move on to 6C2.
All right, the next item is an interlocal agreement with Polk County for the construction and operation of interconnect facilities that will connect the cities and the county's water systems at a location just north of Yule Road and just south of where the Riverstone development is going in. And that's important because Riverstone needs to loop their water system in order to meet development conditions. And this provides a more cost-efficient way for them to do that. So the developers of Riverstone will actually be responsible for constructing this interconnect facility, as well as providing the land where the facility will go. Obviously, connecting the two systems will allow us to respond to emergencies, provides more reliability. Under the agreement, either party will, upon request, will provide water to the other party at the lowest commercial rate provided by that party. There is no obligation on the part of either party to provide water, either for emergencies or other short-term purposes. So it's totally within our discretion. If we feel like we don't have the water available to meet the request under this agreement, we can simply decline to provide that. The agreement is for an initial term of 10 years. It will automatically renew for 4 successive 5-year terms. I think I saw Tom Mariachi on the line. So if you have any technical questions, you can certainly answer those.
Do we have any questions from my colleagues at this point? I'm trying to make sure I see the screen to observe you. Any questions from my colleagues? Okay, Tom, is there anything that you might want to share that we need to know? Okay, see you on the call.
I see his box, but
okay, all right. Well, maybe it's not on the call, but no questions from my colleagues. Then we'll move forward to we've done the finance director's concern there. Down utility, there's no ordinances, no resolutions. We do have 8C miscellaneous. Number 1 there, Ms. Ramona.
Yes, we have a task authorization with Geosyntec Consultants. They would be providing the groundwater monitoring of the byproduct area of the McIntosh Power Plant in order for us to stay compliant with the coal combustion residual rule. They'll be doing monitoring existing well locations as well as assessing groundwater impacts, providing assessments, and also compiling reports as needed. This would be pursuant to a continuing contract that was previously approved by the Commission back in October of 2019. And all reimbursable expenses would be paid in accordance with the consultant's city's consultant expense reimbursement policy. The total not to exceed cost of work is $109,610, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY 2020 budget.
Okay, any questions? Looking again to make sure I got all areas covered here. Okay, no questions. Thank you, Ms. Ramona. To the next one then, number 2, C2.
Okay, the last utility item that we have is an agreement with Crystal Companies, LLC. This is for exterior building envelope repairs at the city's purchasing in the T&D building. This is to deal with the water infiltration that's occurring there, and will include various repairs to the exterior walls, the flashing, access doors, and any other necessary repairs. The city's purchasing department issued an invitation to bid in February 2020. 4 contractors responded. Crystal Companies was the lowest responsible bidder with a bid of $175,663. Upon your approval, they will commence work. The total cost of the work is $175,663, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY 20 budget.
Okay, I see a hand. Okay, Commissioner McCauley.
Hey, Ramona, since they're doing the CRA work, can they do BOGO for that?
Well, I know that they were 2 separate bids, and I don't know the rationale for doing the 2 separate bids. If there was a communication between the 2 different departments, but it may very well be because they are doing 2 city projects that they did offer a reduced price. I think we have someone on the line from maybe Richard Baker or someone from the Lakeland Electric.
I checked with purchasing about that when I noticed that the SIT company was doing both of these projects, and it was just purely coincidental. The request to purchasing came in about a month apart.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any connection between the 2.
Okay, that answers your question. Okay, Commissioner McCauley. All right, now we have Commissioner Reed.
Okay, I thought I saw Heath on there a while ago, but maybe he stepped off. Or Ramona, you may know. This is the building on Parker Street?
Yes.
That's correct? I thought we were going to demo that building.
I don't think so.
No, this is the large
It's a great big building on the west side. It's in ill repair. I will say it looks terrible.
No, this is the building on the north side of Parker.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking about the one on the south side.
The real pretty looking.
Yeah.
You think about the one on the south side, Commissioner Reed.
Are we going to demo that building? Do we intend to demo that building on the south side?
Yeah, I see Heath here, so he can dive in if he wants. But yes, sir, there's going to be a demolition and a rebuild of some of that building. If you remember, wastewater utilities, primarily the distribution operation, still needs that building. There is a phone bank there that we still need to go ahead and operate. And so there'll be some demo, but there's also going to be some rebuilding on there at a lesser cost than what we originally wanted to do when we were talking about the main water utility offices. Keith, am I correct in that?
Yes, sir. You answered great. That is our intent.
Yeah. And I think too, just to help my colleague out, that's that building that we have talked about for a bit now, and there were some things initially they wanted to make sure that building could be salvaged for. And then the cost that we all saw coming out of that to try to salvage that particular facility, to do some other things, was just very out of line. So, and I believe I'm saying this correct, Heath, Mr. Frederick, that we didn't decide to go another route. And this is where we are right now on that building again, which of course, is not pertaining to 8, Roman numeral 8, 2. Am I saying it right, sir?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Okay. All right, any more questions from my colleagues about this? Roman numeral 8C2? All right, seeing none, then that wraps up, I guess, for our agenda study time. Could we, if there's anything that my colleagues would like to share, any one of you at this point? I'm looking around, I see no hands up. Oh, I do see Mr. Delgado. I was gonna come back to you and ask you once my colleagues shared their comments to see if you have anything else you might want to share. But before you do that, I wanted to ask my question. I do know, as it was shared, it has been shared publicly, that our mayor, met with the peace organization virtually and made, of course, a statement that we as commission would follow through on providing some kind of city ordinance and or strategic plan and some kind of programming for the homeless affordable housing kind of situation. And I was wondering, when would that come before us as the commission to discuss that?
Mayor Pro Temp, Bill, you're not Mayor Pro Temp, but you are today.
I'm not Mayor Pro Temp. I'm Philip Walker.
Yeah, I know. Commissioner Walker. Obviously, the mayor was, and some of the commissioners attended the virtual meeting of the Peace Organization. A question was asked of them, was asked of you and the commission and the mayor regarding creating a trust fund for to look at impacting and facilitating additional services from the city for homeless. We have been given, I believe, and once again, I wasn't on that virtual call and I haven't had an opportunity to talk to the mayor, so I don't want to speak for him. But it looks like, based upon the reports, we've got until August to put together documentation or the processes and protocols for a trust fund. Staff has yet to start that. As you know, we're already doing a number of things as it relates to homeless and the housing associated with trying to facilitate that. So we're going to have to, as a staff, sit down and try to understand the nuances and what the processes and procedures are required to set up a trust fund.
And yes, sir, that's I guess that's my particular sentiment, because I can only speak to Philip. I'm one of 7, and I know we have done some things, and we even got a report, not so much a report, but we got comments from our Community and Economic Development Department sharing with us what we are doing, what things are in place. And we know monies have been allocated by us as a commission. So I think it's just probably time, whenever that time can be. And I'm sorry he's away and step away. I want to make sure I ask that, while he will be in our meeting, and that we can wait until that time when he's with us. We would need to discuss that as a team. I think moving forward, how, that particular issue would need to be addressed. And that's, again, just something I want to put out there. That's all. Some other colleagues can hear where I am and what I did hear, because I was one of the ones that was on the phone that, of course, was not allowed to speak or share. Only the 2 mayors, one from Lakeland, which is our mayor, and then the one from Winter Haven, the mayor there, Mr. Danzler. So now, okay, you did have your hand up. I'm sorry, Mr. Tony. I didn't want to fireball you, but go ahead.
Mr. McLeod had his hand up. I'm sorry. He outranks me, so he gets to go first.
Yes, he did.
Thank you, Commissioner Walker. And I agree. I think from my vantage point, I would need more information on the question of an affordable housing trust fund and what that involves. It sounds like that's what staff would do. And when you talk about preparing a report, it would be fact finding of sorts, or to give us, put that information in front of us so we can make that decision. Because today, I just don't know. I don't know enough about the details of such trust funds or how it compares to what we've already done. So it'd be very hard for me to make a commitment on that question today.
Commissioner McLeod, that is our plan. So obviously we heard exactly what everyone else heard after the meeting. And so our plan, and I know Nicole has provided some information to you as commissioners prior to the peace meeting. And so it's our plan to go ahead and put together some report for you to go ahead and opine on.
All righty. Thank you so much. And Tony, you have some things you want to share before we?
Yeah, just real quickly, I guess Governor DeSantis has a press conference around noon today. I suspect, based upon what we're hearing, it'll be additional discussion regarding phase 2 of the reopening plan for the state of Florida. So if any of you are interested, I just want to note that in case you're somewhere in front of a TV or possibly in front of your computer, you may want to follow that. And so I suspect it'll be directly related to some additional discussions on phase 2 of that planned order. As you know, starting Monday, the city will start bringing back staff into the primary business facilities. Our goal is to start moving people back in, start maintaining normal operations to some level. We're still going to have a number of our staff members working from home. They've been very productive up to this point. Our goal is to do this in a phased-in approach through the early part of June. We're looking at some of the other facilities associated with our parks and recreation system that you talked about almost 3 weeks ago. And so as of June 1st, we're trying to put together the final protocols for discussion about the pool, the skate park, a number of those other facilities. The library will do curb service starting the 18th with the hope that by June 1st, we'll be able to go ahead and open. But a lot is going to depend on the governor's discussions regarding social gathering and the number of people that can social gather safely, at least via his executive orders. But I just wanted to keep you aware of that. And the protocols have been put in place. Assistant City Manager Emily Colon sent those out. I hope you had a chance to see them. And so those will be the protocols that we'll be using to once again re-engage employees into the business offices of the city.
And to tag on to what you're saying, Mr. Delgado, I did review what Ms. Emily put out as we do open up here our city facilities on Monday the 18th. And I wanted to make sure I did understand anyone coming into any of our city facilities will be, will we be doing temperature checking, or are we asking those that will come in that they themselves do their own temperature checking? I'm trying to make sure I understood that.
Employees will be doing their own, sir, because they'll come in with their badges, and so they'll be able to go into specific doors designated for employee entrances. They'll be doing their own temperature checking. The threshold is 100.4 per CDC suggestion. As guests come in, and once again, we're going to continue to try to do virtual meetings, go-to meetings, Zoom meetings, teleconference calls, all those. We're going to try to continue to do that. We really want those guests who have business with the city, if they have to be here, we'll meet with them as we have been doing. But if we can do this via another platform, we want to go ahead and do that. The guests will come in into specific doors, whether it's City Hall, Lakeland Electric, or any of our other business offices, and we will have staff down there to work with them as far as taking temperatures and making sure they have a mask. We're going to give each guest a mask, and we're going to ask that they wear those, at least a very strong suggestion that they wear those when they meet with our staff. The temperature gauges that we use are non-contact. So basically, you can do it from a close distance, but they're non-contact. We're going to ask everybody to continue to use the hand sanitizer as they come in, especially the employees, because they'll be doing it to themselves. Ask that they clean the thermometer when they're done with it, clean their hands, and hopefully go to work again. I know Emily's on the line in case you have any questions. She helped put together the protocol, so she did a really good job, her and her staff.
Thank you, Ms. Emily, and my colleagues have any particular questions for her, or if there's anything, Ms. Emily, you want to share with us in addition to what Mr. Delgado has already shared?
No, I mean, I think he covered it all. I'll just say that the city of Lakeland is not creating any methodology. Everything that we are implementing, we are following public health officials, CDC, public health. I mean, it is nothing that the city of Lakeland created. So we're just finding best practices under science and medical advice of those experts.
Thank you, ma'am. I see no other hands raised at this time.
Commissioner Madden.
Commissioner Madden, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Commissioner Walker. I did want to ask, with Emily on the line, certainly everything is about safety protocols, more medical, with regard to temperature. I wondered if there were some best practices with regard to child care for workers as they go back, especially with city municipal governments. I know we had a discussion about our summer camps, and so I was kind of thinking about if we had an audit of sorts with regard to our workers, you know, who have children who need childcare going on through the summer. And then if those had a first come, first serve, if we did do camps of any sort, you know, just wanting to make sure that, you know that if we don't have any summer camps, and certainly there's no school in the summer, what are we doing to accommodate childcare for, you know, I'm assuming that possibly the people who are remote working, that's taken into consideration if they need to provide childcare. But I did, you know, I feel like we need to not ignore that going forward.
Certainly. And of course, you know, I have little kids. So of course, this is something I don't forget because they remind me, you know, that they exist. So I will say from a city standpoint, we have had community partners throughout the coronavirus epidemic that have come forward and said, if you have workers that need childcare and they provided with resources, I have distributed those to department heads to talk to their workforce of who needs childcare. And the tricky part is, and you know, being a mother, that usually the younger children are the harder ones to place. So from infancy to kindergarten, but we actually have had a community partner come forward and say that they would do drop-in care. So if it's a firefighter who works every third shift, they could still use this care versus someone who works in an office Monday through Friday care as well. So we've had everything. There's a few different options too. So everything from infant to age 12, I believe. We have some community partners that have reached out to the city for placement. And as far as I know, it's not full yet. So we would just keep exploring those options. When it gets to a point of being full, and of course, this is separate from any camp options that we talked about, we will have this concern. The more and more employees that go back to work, the more and more kids that are going to need care. So I'm not naive to think that at some point we will max out and need more. And that is something we're going to have to be creative about and work. It's going to be kind of, we can't plan too far in advance because we don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic. I know my girls' daycare is not open yet. Maybe they're going to open. It all depends. So it's hard to plan too far in advance, but right now we do have resources for our employees to get them back to work.
And I do think it's important, you know, as my colleague has already indicated, Commissioner Madden, as you have, and of course, I think you all know where I stand with trying to see what we can provide for not only our employees, which I think surely we will make sure that those who have little ones and not having a summer camp of any kind of any sort at this time, but as we move forward, as I know Mr. Delgado has shared with me and shared with you all, hopefully as the governor opens up even more, and it could be, you know, well before the summer's out, we can maybe do something an abbreviated or more modified kind of a programming, I don't know, of some sort for our employees as well as the residents of our city. Because I still say, as I know some other organizations are having and planning for camps around our city, if we could do something like that, I think it's important that we can look at, you know, sharing with our residents how best to support them again, based on what's safe and what's, you know, I guess more efficient and the best way of doing it overall. So I appreciate that comment there, Ms. Emily.
Yeah, no problem.
Any more comments?
That's it. That's it for me, Commissioner.
Well, thank you, sir. And we have a motion to adjourn. I see a motion to adjourn in seconds. So thank you all. You have an enjoyable weekend. We'll see you Monday.
Thank you.